The scream came first, then the cameras. Rain hammered the marble steps of Vale Tower as Eli Mercer knelt, hands shaking. Damien Vale said, "Stay down. Charity looks better from that angle." Flashbulbs snapped like tiny storms. Eli tasted metal. He kept one hand in his jacket pocket, fingers around a cold iron seal. Ruth had said, "Hold this when the world tries to break you." Neon bled across wet stone. A guard's boot slid near Alice's shoulder. Jonah Pike whispered from the crowd, "Get up when they blink." Eli breathed slow. Fear wanted to spread. Pride wanted to speak. Damien laughed, bright and empty. Eleanor Vale watched from a black car, windows half fogged. Sirens hummed afar like low thunder. Eli felt heat in the iron, a pulse against his palm. He thought, if I rise, I fall forever. If I kneel, I learn the ground. He lifted his head anyway, and the seal seemed to answer. Morning crawled in gray over the basement room. Pipes ticked like tired clocks. Ruth Mercer stitched a torn sleeve by the stove, and steam rose from an old kettle. Eli sat on the crate and listened to the rain ease. He said, "I stayed down. I hate that I stayed down." Ruth kept sewing and nodded once. She said, "You chose to live. That is not small." The iron seal lay on the table between chipped mugs. Light from the window made its edges glow. Distant traffic hummed like a slow river. Eli wanted to work, to pay the back rent, to wipe last night from the city's mouth. Fear curled in his chest like cold smoke. Ruth threaded the needle again and did not look up. She said, "We carry storms until they pass." The kettle clicked off. The seal seemed heavier. What price would it ask if he used it? Jonah Pike knocked once and let himself in, shaking rain from his coat. He said, "They were playing it on every screen." Eli felt the room tighten. The seal sat where he left it, silent. Ruth poured tea into thin cups. Jonah placed a folded flyer down. Vale Tower hiring for a public event, one night only, high pay for silence. Eli's jaw worked. He said, "They want me there again." Ruth watched the steam drift and said nothing. Pipes thrummed above like a low drum. Jonah lowered his voice. He said, "You could earn enough to cover rent, and I could stand near the back." Eli stared at the door as if it might answer. Pride and hunger pulled in opposite directions. The flyer's ink bled from the damp. What kind of trap pays in cash and shame? Eli stood under a rusted bridge and dialed the number. Wind pushed grit along the pavement. A clipped voice confirmed the job and the rules. He said, "No questions, wear black, keep your head down." Eli watched a train drag sparks along the rails. He pictured Damien's smile and felt heat rise in his throat. He said, "I will come." The call ended with dead air. Cars hissed by on wet asphalt. Jonah texted a single word, "Don't." Ruth sent a dot, then another, then nothing more. Eli slipped the iron seal into his inner pocket. The metal pressed warm against his chest. He breathed slow and counted the beats. If he went, he could pay rent. If he stayed, he would drown in pride. Which debt lasts longer, money or silence? Night returned like a closed fist. Vale Tower glowed with banners and polished stone. Eli joined a line of temporary staff in black. Eyes forward, badges clipped. Damien crossed the lobby with cameras in tow. He said, "Look who learned to dress." Eli did not answer. He kept the iron seal close and counted steps to the service elevator. Ruth's voice lived in his breath. She had said, "Keep your dignity where no one can reach it." Music thumped through the walls like a giant heart. Jonah slipped him a nod from the far end of the corridor. A guard checked bags, then waved them through. The elevator doors shut with a soft gulp. Eli watched the floor numbers climb. On 12, the lights flickered. On 13, something clicked inside the seal. The alarm started before the doors opened. Red strobes pulsed across the service hall, and the crowd of staff surged like a tide. Eli Mercer ran, shoulder scraping metal, lungs burning. A guard shouted for badges. Jonah Pike yelled, "Left stairwell, now." Boots clattered on wet steps. The music above kept pounding like a giant drum. Eli's chest ached. He said, "Why help me?" Jonah snapped. "Because they won last time." Trust felt thin as paper. A second guard blocked the landing and barked for landing, and barked for bags. Eli gripped the iron seal inside his jacket. He felt heat or fear or both. Damien Vale's voice echoed from the speakers, smooth and smug, selling charity in gold words. Eli said, "He wants me visible." Jonah said, "He wants you cornered." Down the stairs came fresh light and the scent of rain. The seal pressed in, and a faint vibration answered his pulse. "What door does this thing want?" They burst into an empty loading bay. The alarm was muffled here, a dull heartbeat behind concrete. Rain lines stitched the open dock door. Eli leaned against a crate and fought the shake in his hands. Jonah said, "You're not alone." Eli stared at the seal and breathed. He said, "It hums when I'm cornered." Jonah's eyes narrowed. He said, "Then it's a compass." A forklift sat silent, keys gone, oil scent thick. Overhead lights buzzed and flickered. Eli's anger softened into exhaustion. He wanted warmth, a plan, a way to stand without begging. Jonah touched the crate and said, "A rumor says the Vales keep a vault room below the gala floor." Eli felt the hum grow, steady as a metronome. The alarm cut off. Silence fell like a sheet. The seal warmed, and a draft pulled across the floor toward a dark service corridor. Was that where it pointed? The corridor narrowed, lights steady now, cameras blinking red like patient eyes. A screen on the wall flipped to a live feed. Damien Vale on stage, smile sharp, hand raised to calm applause. He said, "Tonight we lift the city." Eleanor Vale stood near the wings, face set like stone. A second feed showed the loading bay they had left. Guards entered in a quiet line. Control walked on soft shoes. Eli swallowed, and the seal grew hotter. Damien's voice filled the hall again, warm and false. He said, "We reward loyalty," Jonah whispered. "He's sweeping the lower floors." Eli felt the balance shift. The building was a net, and he was the catch. Cameras tracked movement with a gentle glide, almost kind. He wanted to smash them. He looked at Jonah. He said, "If you were him, where would you push me?" Jonah said, "Toward the one door you shouldn't open." "Which door is that?" They slipped into records, a room of steel drawers and humming vents. A single desk lamp cut a cone of amber across dust. An old man sat there as if he had been waiting all night. He said, "Close the door, please." Jonah stiffened. Eli kept one hand near the seal. The man smiled without showing teeth. He said, "Name's Arthur Harrow. I keep what they try to forget." He slid a folder forward. Inside lay sketches that matched the iron crest, and a short line in faded ink. "Seal bearer shall rank above all titles." Elias' breath caught. He said, "Is this a trick?" Harrow said, "It's a map, not mercy." The vents rattled. Somewhere a lift clanged. Harrow's voice dropped. He said, "Truth raises you and ruins you. Decide which you seek." Eli felt the hum steady. Eli felt the hum steady. Did rising mean losing everyone who could not follow? Harrow drew a quick map on a receipt. A maintenance lift behind catering led to an old vault. He said, "Charter plates are down there." Jonah shook his head. He said, "This smells like bait." Eli felt fear rise like heat, then settle into a hard line. He said, I am done kneeling to rumor. He slipped the map into his sleeve. The seal throbbed once like a yes. Harold watched with tired eyes. He said, "If you open the door, you can't shut what follows." The hall outside murmured with radios. Eli pictured Ruth at the small table, stitching, not asking him to be brave, asking him to be whole. He stepped to the door and looked back at Jonah. He said, "You don't have to come." Jonah swallowed. He said, "I hate the Vales more than I fear them." They moved into the corridor. Ahead, the air cooled. What waits behind a door, built to outlive money? Quiet fell as they reached catering. Steam curled from trays, and soft music bled under the door to the gala. For a moment, the world felt normal, almost gentle. A woman in a neat suit waited near the service lift with an ID badge that read compliance. She said, "I'm Avery Shaw. I can get you down there without tripping alarms." Jonah traded a glance with Eli. A flicker of doubt. Avery's hands moved calm, but her eyes measured. She said, "You want the old vault. I hate what they've done to this city." The lift dinged with a small, polite sound. Eli weighed the seal's warmth against his pulse. He wanted to trust something. He said, "Why help?" Avery smiled like a secret. She said, "Because truth is overdue." The doors slid open. Inside, a camera lens tilted, then went still. Why did safe feel staged? The lift hummed and sank. Avery kept her gaze on the floor numbers. She said, "My brother lost his job when the Vales bought the mills." Eli studied her profile and wanted to believe. Jonah's shoulders loosened just a little. He said, "If this works, we publish everything." The light inside the car was soft and kind. The seal rested warm against Eli's chest, steady as breath. Avery said, "There's a side corridor for." We cut across, then the vault. She rubbed her thumb against the badge. A small, nervous circle. Eli felt the car slow. He said, "If we find proof, we share it with the courts." Avery's smile did not reach her eyes. She said, "With whoever can protect it." The doors slid open to a quiet hall lined with old brick. Somewhere distant, a lock clicked. What was that little pause in her voice? They crossed into an arched brick passage. The air was cool and tasted of metal. A speaker crackled. Then a velvet voice filled the tunnel. Damien Vale said, "Guests of the lower levels, do mind your step." Eli stopped cold. Eli stopped cold. Jonah swore under his breath. Avery looked up, eyes wide, then too calm. Damien continued, smooth as glass. He said, "Some doors open only to old promises." Eleanor Vale's tone cut in, clipped and exact. She said, "Bring the item to the plate and we will end this." Eli's skin prickled. The lights dimmed and rose, a slow breathing trick. Control flexed in every wire. He said, "They are already here." Jonah said, "Then we end them." Eli tasted fear and iron and resolve. A sign pointed to vault. Another to archives. Which path is theirs and at what cost? They reached a steel door with an old crest plate. Avery keyed a panel and said, 2 seconds. The hall behind them filled with quiet footsteps. Jonah turned first. 4 guards stepped from shadow, faces blank. Avery's voice thinned. She said, "I'm sorry." Eli felt the floor slip. He said, "Who do you work for?" Avery did not look at him. She said, "For the side that wins." The guards raised batons in a slow, certain rhythm. Damien's laugh drifted from the speaker, light and pleased. Eli's chest burned. Rage tried to speak. Breath held it down. Jonah said, "You sold us for a badge." Avery flinched, then set her mouth. She said, "For safety." The seal throbbed against the plate, a clear call. Eli planted his feet as the first guard stepped in. What does a door owe the one who opens it? The strike came fast. Jonah blocked. Batten cracked his forearm. Pain staggered him. Eli drove his shoulder into the lead guard, slammed him to the wall. The seal burned hot as a coal. Avery stepped back and watched the rhythm of the fight like a metronome. Eli pressed the seal to the crest plate. A deep mechanism groaned awake. Air rushed past, old and dry. The guards froze for a heartbeat, then lunged again. Jonah shouted, "Do it." Eli turned the seal a quarter a half. The plate clicked. The door sighed. Light spilled out, pale and ancient. Avery whispered, "Daunt." Eli saw his face in the steel and saw a man tired of shame. The door opened wider. Behind it lay plates of law and a path no one could close. If he enters, can he still protect the people he loves? Silence pooled in the vault after the door exhaled. Dust hung like pale snow in the beam. Eli Mercer steadied his breath and tasted iron. Jonah Pike winced and pressed his arm. He said, "I'm fine." The room smelled of old paper and machine oil. Shelves held plates, ledgers, and a brass stand with a shallow bowl. Avery Shaw stood at the threshold, eyes lowered. She said, "I made a choice." Eli felt the sting and let it cool. The seal hummed softer now, like a tired heart. He traced the crest with one thumb and watched the light bend on the metal. Betrayal was a bruise, not a break. He said, the door still opened. Air moved through floor vents in slow, even breaths. Somewhere above, music dimmed. He set the seal on the brass bowl. It fit, the stand clicked, and a panel slid aside. Behind it waited a single plate, etched with his family name. Eli lifted the plate. The metal was cold and clean. Letters rose sharp under his fingers. The room softened, and the past leaned in. A sewing needle clicked in memory. Steam hissed from a small kettle. Ruth Mercer said, "Keep this safe when voices grow loud." Her hands folded cloth like prayer. In the mirror of the plate, Eli saw a younger Ruth at a mansion door. Head bowed, a child on her hip. Eleanor Vale's voice in memory said, "You work. You do not ask." The house smelled of lemon wax and power. Rain tapped tall windows. Ruth slipped a wrapped shape into a drawer and looked both ways. She said, "Not for us. For the city." The present snapped back with a hum from the stand. Jonah whispered, "She knew." Eli nodded. He said, "She hid it where they would never look." The etched line glowed. The seal named him steward. A speaker crackled above the shelves. Eleanor Vale said, "Return what is ours." Her tone held no heat, only command. Eli faced the grill and let the quiet carry weight. He said, "It was never yours." Jonah breathed through pain and nodded. The seal's hum matched Eli's pulse, sure and slow. Footsteps passed beyond the door and faded. Eleanor said, "Power is stewardship by other means." Eli held the plate at arm's length and read the charter line. Each word steadied him. He said, "Steward above wealth." The air felt wider, as if walls stepped back. He remembered the marble steps and the coin arc. The bruise in his chest loosened. He said, "I am done kneeling." The speaker stayed silent for a long beat. Then a softer voice cut in. Arthur Harrow said, "Say it to their faces, not the dust." The truth was not a secret. It was a stage. Elevator doors sighed open beyond the vault hall. Eleanor walked in with calm steps, 2 guards a pace behind. She did not raise her voice. She said, "People need order. We provide it." Damien Vale's laugh rode in on a distant mic. He said, "And we bill them for it." Eli kept the plate high, not like a shield but like a mirror. He saw their faces cut by the light. Eleanor said, "We hold the city together when it wants to tear itself apart." Her eyes were steady, almost kind. Eli asked, "At what price?" she said. "At the price the world has always paid," Jonah said. "Paid by who?" Eleanor did not blink. She said, "By those who were not ready to lead." The words fell like polished stones. Line and lie touched. Eli felt the twist land. The enemy was not only a person, it was a staircase built to lift a few. Eli closed his eyes and let the words settle like stones in a river. He opened them with new weight and less noise. He said, "So this was the truth all along." Jonah stood straighter. He said, "Then carry it." Avery Shaw hovered in shadow, torn and trembling. Eli lifted the seal from the stand and set it into the plate's hollow ring. The metal locked with a clear note, thin, and he felt sorrow for years bent under other hands. He felt Ruth's quiet on his shoulders like a shawl. He said, "We bring this up where all can see." The room seemed brighter, not with light but with shape. Loss and clarity walked together. He turned toward the hall and did not rush. Jonah matched his pace. The door waited. The music swelled above. A stage was coming. So was the bill. They reached the service stairs. Air thinned with heat from the gala lights. Footsteps echoed above, tight and quick. Eli Mercer paused at the final door and felt his breath slow. The plate was firm in his hands. The seal was warm against palm lines. Jonah Pike whispered, "On your word." The hallway hummed like a throat before a shout. A light flickered, then held. Eleanor's voice murmured somewhere, a command without volume. Damien Vale laughed once, short and sharp. Eli said, "We go now." He listened to the crowd's pulse beyond the door. The stage crew moved in steady patterns. The band dropped to a hush, a lens iris open on a crane. Jonah said, "You don't have to be perfect." Eli smiled without teeth. He said, "Only true." He pushed the bar. The door clicked. The night pulled in a breath and waited. Eli stepped into the wash of light and crossed to the edge of the stage. The crowd turned as one body. Damien Vale faced him with a smile built for cameras. He said, "Our guest returns." Eleanor Vale stood just off stage, chin high. Eli lifted the plate and set it on a lectern. He said, "This is the city's voice, not yours." Damien spread his hands. He said, "We give, we protect, we create jobs." Eli said, "You buy silence." His heart beat a clean, hard rhythm. The band fell quiet. Glassware stilled. Jonah filmed from the wing, shoulders tight. Eleanor said, "Do not turn a clause into a crown." Eli pressed the seal into the plate. A chime rang clear. The hall lights dimmed to a legal mode. He said, "This clause outranks wealth." Damien's smile thinned. He said, "Prove it." The plate answered with light. Security surged toward the stage. Jonah moved first and took the hit meant for Eli. The baton cracked air and then bone. Sound dropped into cotton. Jonah gasped and held the guard's arm. He said, "Finish it." Eli's chest burned. He wanted to trade truth for fists. He did not. He tightened the seal and turned it until the crest aligned. The plate unlocked a drawer within the lectern. Inside lay copies of the charter plates. He raised one high. He said, "Witness." The crowd shifted from noise to breath. Jonah knelt, teeth set, eyes fierce. Eli crouched for a heartbeat. He said, "Stay with me." Jonah nodded once. He said, "Always." Sirens wailed outside the tower, faint but coming closer. The cost stood beside them, bruised and bright. The stage felt smaller. The stakes felt clean. Eleanor walked onto the stage and faced the light without a flinch. She said, "If you break us, you break the spine that holds this city up." Eli held her gaze and did not blink. He said, "Spines bend. They are not chains." Damien Vale stepped between them, voice sweet as syrup. He said, "You want to be king." Eli shook his head. He said, "I want the law to stand where money sat." He placed the plate into a public slot at the lectern's base. The hall projectors threw the claws on every wall. The words burned in clean white. Damien won. Eli met him with calm and slid aside. Jonah shouted, "Now." Eli pressed the final key under the seal. A lock clanged through the building. Accounts linked to the seal flashed on screen, marked for audit by City Right. The room inhaled, then broke. Sound thinned to a faint ring. Damien froze under the wash of letters. Eleanor lowered her eyes at last. She said, "So the city remembers." Jonah leaned against the lectern, breath ragged but steady. Eli felt the seal cool in his hand. He set it flat where all could see. He said, "Higher than rich is duty." The crowd did not cheer. They watched. The moment asked for quiet, and quiet came. Eli looked past the lights toward the marble steps. Rain had stopped. The floor held his weight like a promise. He said, "Let the audit begin." Outside, sirens slowed to idle. Inside, glasses stood untouched. Jonah smiled through pain. He said, "You stood." Eli answered with a small nod and a long breath. A new day waited off stage, and it would not arrive soft. Dawn thinned the night until the stage lights looked tired. Smoke lifted in soft threads and slipped through the rafters. The crowd had gone home to talk or to deny. Cables lay like shed snakes across the floor. Eli Mercer stood still and listened to the building breathe. Somewhere a glass tapped once, then settled. Jonah Pike leaned on the lectern, face pale, breath slow. He said, "I'm here." Eli nodded and let the quiet hold him up. The iron seal cooled against the plate, no longer burning, only present. He traced a scratch on the stage with the side of his shoe. Silence weighed less than anger, and more than victory. He thought of nights under rain and laughter from the steps. He looked toward the doors and knew what was gone. The city would wake, but a part of yesterday would not. He walked the side corridor where the music once shook the wall. Now there was only the hum of vents and the soft tick of cooling metal. Eli pressed a hand to his chest and felt the beat settle into a calmer drum. Memory slid in without asking. Ruth Mercer folding shirts by the stove, steam fogging the small window, a coin arcing on marble, a boot near his shoulder. Jonah's one word, "always," he whispered. "We paid for truth." The words felt simple and heavy. Guilt brushed him for the bruise on Jonah's arm, for the fear in Ruth's eyes, for Avery's choice. Relief met it and did not fight. He breathed both and let them sit together. Far above, sirens became birds and then nothing. Life would not return to what it was. It would return to what it could stand. Outside the tower, early light touched wet stone. Jonah eased onto the steps with a careful breath. He said, "Hurts less when I don't move." Eli sat beside him and watched taxis weave like slow fish. Time stretched thin and kind. A bus braked inside. A street sweeper hissed past and left clean arcs on the pavement. Jonah said, "You did not flinch." Eli answered, "You stood first." The words fell between them and rested. A stranger paused, looked at the seal on the news screen through glass, and kept walking. Jonah laughed once small. He said, "We are both foolish and stubborn." Eli nodded and felt something unknot. He said, "I forgive what it cost you." Jonah's eyes shone and he blinked it back. For a beat the city was only breath and light. In the basement room, the kettle clicked and cooled. Ruth Mercer slept in the chair with a blanket over her knees. A note lay under a spool of thread, the letters careful and steady. Arthur Harrow had left it at the door. Keep the plates where words are loudest. Eli read it once and heard other voices inside it. Ruth saying, keep this safe when voices grow loud. Harrow saying, truth raises you and ruins you. Eleanor saying, people need order. He set the note down and straightened the neat row of mended cuffs on the table. He whispered, we will keep it public. The room smelled of soap and old tea. Sun touched the iron seal's shadow on the wall. He let the warmth reach him. A small smile lifted and did not flee. By noon, a quiet crowd formed at the courthouse steps. Papers posted under clear covers showed the clause in crisp print. Eli stood off to the side and watched people read. Some frowned. Some nodded once as if they had known and forgotten. Jonah said, they will argue. Let them. Eli held the seal and felt no heat, only weight. He said, we give it a home where it can be seen. He placed the seal in a glass case beside the plates. A clerk locked it and stepped back. The hall stilled for a breath, then moved again, slow and human. Eli touched the glass and did not need to speak. Quiet spread through him like clean water down a dry path. He turned toward the old steps. There was more to face, but less to fear. Afternoon, light lay gentle across the city, like a hand that forgives. Traffic moved without hurry. In the courthouse, footsteps echoed in careful pairs. Eli Mercer stood in the gallery alone and let the hush rest on his shoulders. He traced the air where rain once burned his skin. He said, we're still here. No one answered, and that was right. The seal sat in its case and threw a small circle of light onto the floor. He watched it flicker as clouds drifted. What was lost did not return. What remained learned how to stand. He thought of the basement stove, the stitched cuffs, the steps, the coin, the crest. His chest felt sore and open, like a door that finally swings true. Was it worth it to hurt and to heal in public sight? He walked from the courthouse to the old steps of Vale Tower. The banners were gone. The marble held faint scuffs from last night's storm. Eli lowered himself to one knee by choice and touched the stone. He said, I remember. Then he stood and brushed the dust from his palm. A delivery bike rattled past. A child's laugh crossed the street and dissolved. He turned toward the avenue and began to walk. Not fast, not slow, just steady. Each block carried less weight than the one before. In a window, a news crawl moved like a river of small words. He did not stop to read. He knew the work would take time. He let the city set the pace and matched it. Departures do not slam. They fade into steps that do not look back. At home, a small recorder sat on the table where thread once tangled. Eli pressed play. Ruth Mercer's voice filled the room, soft and even. She said, if you are hearing this, you kept something I could only carry halfway. Steam kissed the window in the old memory that lived in her tone. She said, I chose silence so you could choose speech. Eli closed his eyes and let the words wash through him. She did not bless or command. She simply told the truth of long work and small mercies. The tape clicked and stopped. He whispered, I heard you. Outside, the day leaned toward gold. He set the recorder next to the charter copy. One sentence held the whole road. The city belongs to those who lift it. Weeks unspooled. Ledgers opened. Shops argued, and then adjusted. Pay found its way to old hands. Jonah Pike filmed workers laughing at noon and crying at dusk. He said, it's messy, and it's beautiful. Eli walked the same blocks every morning and signed papers that made rooms fair. He did not raise his voice. He did not hide either. In the tower, new guards learned new rules. In the basement, the kettle sang a softer note. A season turned the light from white to honey. Time did what it does. It taught and it took. Eli breathed with it and kept the pace. Change felt less like a storm and more like a tide. He let it move him without trying to own it. Near sunset, he returned to the courthouse one last time. The lobby was quiet, the air cool and even. He stood before the glass case and watched the seal catch the last light. He said, "Lift others and you rise." The words were barely sound. They did not need more. He placed his palm on the glass and left no mark. Outside, the sky moved from gold to blue, and the city exhaled into evening. He turned away with a calm that did not ask to be named. The doors opened on soft hinges. The steps welcomed simple feet. The final thought did not try to explain. It stayed as a small, bright echo that fit in a single breath. Truth must never be owned.